working on the cat dissection because I do want to get that started soon. But it's not something we can just jump right in. There's things that we have to do to prepare, especially for a dissection that big. So I am trying to get some materials together to help us prepare for that. So once I get that figured out, then we will start the cat dissections and we'll work on them throughout this semester. We're going to start with the skeletal system today. I don't believe in waiting. I don't need to go over policies and stuff because I had you all before. So we're going to jump right in with notes and things today in just a little bit. But we're going to start with the skeletal system. There are 206 bones in the body and you're going to learn pretty much all of them. The exceptions are like you're not going to have to learn like rib 1, rib 2, and things like that, and like vertebrae 1. But you are going to learn all the bones of the wrist and of the bones of the ankles and pretty much everything else. Your test is going to be a practical test. I don't know if you've ever had a practical test before, but I always do a practical test, and since we now have muscle models, we'll probably do a practical test with the muscles too. Yes?
Is that where we just pointed out on the
No. So what a practical test is, half of your test will be on Google Forms like we've always done, and those will just be the questions, like give an example of a synovial joint or something like that. But then we have a lot of bones, and you will have an actual skull, and it will have a number with a sticker on the skull, and you will have to identify that bone. Okay, so that's what a practical test is. So about half the test will be on bones and half the test will be on paper. It'll be a little bit different for me because what I've done in the past is I've laid it all out and I had a lab room and I would lock the lab room so nobody had access to it, but I can't really do that in here, so I'm going to have to do it a little bit differently, but I think I figured out a way that I can do it that it'll work. So we still are going to have a lab practical test. And basically you'll have actual bones in front of you for the ones we have here in class, which you'll have plenty of time to look at and get familiar with. And then they'll have a sticker on them and you'll have to identify that bone. But because this is an upper level class, we are going to take it a step further and we're going to have to learn more than just the bones. We're actually going to learn some of the parts of the bones too. There are things called condyles and epicondyles and trochanters and things like that that we're also going to learn. Then after we do the skeletal system, we're going to learn the muscular system. This one's a little bit harder because with the muscular system, the muscles aren't as easy to identify. If you look at these models, which I'm so glad we got because we had to go through quite a mess to get these, and our instructional coach was great at helping me get these. But you can see that the muscles look very similar. So it's very difficult with the muscles because there's not a lot that distinguishes them. The bones are a lot easier because they're much more distinctive and basically just easier to identify. Also, there are 640 some muscles and there's only 206 bones. We're not going to learn all 600 muscles. We're going to learn about 80 to 90 that I've picked out that are the main ones. So, I mean, that's good. You don't have to learn 600 muscles. Then we're going to do the nervous system. With the nervous system, it's kind of challenging too because the parts of the brain can be a little bit confusing and what each part of the brain does. So we'll be learning about that, and we will do a sheep brain dissection for that one. And we do have the sheep brains. Cardiovascular and respiratory, we learn those together, partly because they're very connected and also partly because the respiratory system isn't super complicated. So we'll learn those two together and spend most of our focus on the cardiovascular system and then a little bit of time with the respiratory because again, it's not that complicated. And then digestive and excretory. We'll spend the majority of the time on the digestive system and a little bit of time on excretory. Excretory is like kidneys, bladder, and urinary kind of stuff. So that one, again, not a super big system, although the kidneys are quite complicated in the way that they extract the fluid from the blood and make urine. Hopefully we get to reproductive. That is always my goal. I think the reproductive system is fascinating. I think the development of babies is really interesting. So hopefully we get to that. We will see how the semester goes. We are moving at a really good pace. We were already able to get in the census unit that we weren't able to do with my previous classes, so good job. Let's keep it up. And then of course your final, although of course you guys are leaving early, so we will have your final early. since you're all seniors in here, we'll do that early. The final will be another presentation kind of thing. Questions? It'll be another presentation. And then I forgot to mention the cardiovascular, we will dissect a sheep heart with that one. Okay. Questions?
What chapter is this?
I just said semester 2 note.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting over, so in my notes I have it
I
as unit
literally
1.
just made the top the exact same, but I put semester 2.
Okay. Alright, so, fair warning. This is memorization, and there's really no way to get around it. At this point, we're just memorizing a lot. Now, it's not all memorization. We're going to talk about like the structures of the bones and how the bone heals and things like that. But a lot of it is memorization. Has anybody ever learned the bones of the body before?
Health class.
Health class?
PE.
Okay, so we're not starting from scratch here, which is good. But even if we are starting from scratch, we'll be able to get through it. Now, what I typically do for these where there's a lot of memorization, I will go over them fast in class, and I will give you tips and tricks to how to memorize it. This is how I remember it. This is a good, look for this structure, that'll help you. And then I will allow lots of class time for you to work through it on your own and assignments to help build on that. Because I can stand up here and say, this is the radius. But unless you are actually looking at it and working with the bone and learning for yourself, you're not going to learn it. So there will be lessons like this in class, but sometimes I will go through it fast, and it's not to overwhelm you. It's because me telling you about the bones is not necessarily the best way for you to learn about the bones. And it'll make sense as we go through it. I do highly suggest flashcards. Flashcards are really, really helpful. There's also this website, freeanatomyquiz.org. I'm pretty sure that's the website. But freeanatomyquiz.org is a really good website. It's got a lot of bones and muscle quizzes where you can go through and quiz yourself. So I do recommend that website as a good study tool. It would also be helpful at this point to download an anatomy app. There are lots of free anatomy apps out there. So try out a couple different ones and see what works best for you, and explore some of the websites that are available too. Because again, this is going to be a lot of memorizing, and there's really just no way to get around it. I mean, there's a lot of bones just in the skull, and we're going to learn all of them. So it's just going to take a lot of practice. It's going to take a lot of work, and you don't want to fall behind with these, because if you get behind, it's going to be really hard to keep up. Any questions? Not to overwhelm you on the first day of school. You can do it. I've gotten other students through it. I'll get you through it. And bones are kind of fun. Bones aren't terrible, so it's a good one to start with. All right. So we're jumping right in. Yes.
I left my pencil pouch in my backpack. Can you put it in?
There. Yeah. Or there's pencils here too. Yeah.
Can I go get my pins?
Yes. That's fine. All right.
Now you my backpack's in my locker.
So the skeletal system is more than just bones. There are joints, cartilage, and ligaments that all go into that. Remember the difference between ligaments and tendons? Who remembers?
Bone, muscle.
Yes. So ligaments is bone-to-bone attachments. Tendons is bone-to-muscle attachments. And so this is focusing mostly on the ligaments. When we get to the muscular system, we'll talk about the tendons. The skeleton can be divided into two main subdivisions: axial skeleton and appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton, think axis. Axial is axis. And so this is your spine, your head, and your ribs. So the straight line, spine, head, and ribs are part of the axial skeleton. Appendicular, think appendages. Okay, so the appendicular skeleton is the arms and legs, hands and feet, shoulders, and hips. just didn't want to risk it with it. Alyssa's fine. Spiders are fine. Although the first day home, the cat knocked one of the spiders over, so that was fun. And then the spiders got relocated to a room that does not have cats.
My cat killed my hamster.
That's what I'm talking to.
My uncle broke his neck.
Where'd you get your newspapers?
What?
Was it like it was like 2 or 3 days ago? I remember seeing it on your story.
It doesn't hurt at all.
This one. No, I looked at it.
Alright, so if we're looking at this picture here, the red is representing on this side the appendicular, so you can see the pelvic, the shoulders, the arms, legs, hands, and feet is appendicular. Axial is head, ribs, spine, and the sacrum, which is the tailbone. Now, the functions of the bone, their main function is, of course, to support the body, but that is not their only function. They will protect the soft organs. Think of your rib cage. Your rib cage protects your heart and your lungs. Your brain is encased within your skull, so the more vital organs are protected by the bones. They provide attachment for the muscles. If we just had muscles and no bones for them to attach to, then we wouldn't be able to move. The bones provide the attachment places. They do store fat and minerals. We'll learn that our bone marrow has a high percentage of fat inside of it. And the bones themselves are a high area for calcium and phosphorus. And of course, the long bones do make blood cells. So all of the blood that is produced in our body is made in the long bones, like the long arms and the long bones of the legs. This is called hematopoiesis, which is blood cell formation. We'll talk a little bit more about hematopoiesis when we talk about the cardiovascular unit. And that's another thing to keep in mind as we move forward is these systems are really interconnected. Yeah, the skeletal system is kind of standalone, but it's also connected to the like the muscular system and the cardiovascular system and things like that.
Oh, just saying, just got my schedule. Do you have one?
Yes.
I learned it from Chandler.
Jordan Kimber?
And I just got the one because I was taking the notes on the language on the computer. I say library.
Yeah, 1, 2, 4, 6, 7. I'm gonna go to the office.
So they're like,
Yeah. They
it was okay. We all caught a cold, so I'm still kind of recovering from that. Kids were kids. I'm a little overwhelmed with the messiness and the toy status in our house. That's to be expected after
I
Christmas.
put down
But it wasn't bad.
I saw Sea We saw Sea Lunch, right?
That was why we moved
We
back.
saw Fifth Hour.
It's a 1.5 hour drive versus a 9 hour drive.
I switched, yeah.
Not bad.
Not bad at all.
Oh yeah, I did. Sorry. I mean,
And we didn't want to live super close because if we lived too close, then they'd be over all the
On the
time.
wrong side of the bed.
It's hard. It's hard.
What? I didn't say blue.
Alright, so the adult skeleton has 206 bones. The smallest bone is what? We learned this last semester. Face in the inner ear. Good job. You guys haven't brain dumped everything.
Question.
Yes.
It's true Babies are born without like bones. Aren't they born without like a kneecap?
Babies are born with a lot more. I forget the exact number. But babies have a lot more bones because they haven't fused yet, and a lot of the bones have cartilage. And they do not have kneecaps. That's one of the reasons why when they're crawling, that crawling doesn't hurt them as much as crawling hurts us because they don't have kneecaps. So it's funny. There are two basic types of bones. There's compact and spongy. So if you look at a bone, it's made of these two parts. There's the compact or the very compressed bone, and then there's the spongy bone. It's not even really spongy. It's more like airy, which has more pockets. And it's got more holes in it. So that's the difference between compact and spongy. Most bones will typically have a compact or a spongy part.
Yeah.
Teeth are a little bit different. They're made of different material. So the enamel is made of like different material than the bones itself. So they use it on the Have you ever seen like
Because I was
because if you look at an X-ray, you can see the teeth that are in the jaw, and it goes like the. But at the university I taught at, they had a whole closet that they were putting some baby. It was a femur.
Hey Irma, hey William.
Ulna radius.
Remind me to tell you about Fred the Head.
Tarsal, what is it? Okay, yeah, ulna radius.
Alright, if we were looking at a flat bone from the skull, you can see that as far as the skull, there's actually just a thin part of compact bone, and then the spongy is in the center. So depending on what the bone is and what it's used for, it's going to have different degrees of spongy versus compact. So this one's compact, and then you can see the spongy inside. Now, there's going to be a lot of these that have stars because we have a lot of information. So this is in Google Classroom for you. There is a lot of information and a lot of terms, so you're going to see more and more slides pop up that I have already given to you because I don't want you to have to write all of this down, but you still need to know it. So, bones can be classified into groups based on their shape. The first is a long bone. So these are bones that are longer than they are wide. So think of like the arms and the legs. Arms and legs are good examples of long bones. Flat bones, like the name suggests, are thin and flat. The spongy between the compact bone and think of like the skull, the sternum, which is the breastbone, and the ribs. Those would all be flat bones. Short bones are kind of cubed shaped. These are going to be found in like the wrist and the ankle. Irregular bones, they're kind of weird. They don't really fit in any other group. And so irregular bones would be like the vertebrae. They have just kind of weird shape and a weird structure to them, and the hip bones as well. Sesamoid bones. These are the ones that are short and they don't really connect with another bone. They're kind of floating bones. Kneecaps, or the patella is a good example, and also the hyoid bone, which is the bone that's underneath your tongue, are examples of sesamoid bones.
We have a bone under our tongue? I thought this was just hollow under here.
It's partially hollow, but let me see. I pulled some of my
What bone?
example bones. This one. This is the hyoid bone. And it fits underneath your chin.
Oh, so it's like hidden under our chin. Oh.
Your tongue attaches to it.
Oh.
But that's the hyoid.
Huh.
It just hurts like after.
Like the hillbilly.
I keep mine.
What is it called?
All right, so here are the examples of the classification. We've got our flat bone, which is the sternum. Short bones, the talus, which is in the ankle. Irregular bones, like a vertebrae. And then the long bones, like in the arms and the legs. Now, the bone itself has different parts to it because scientists, as you will learn, they label everything. They have a name for everything. And sometimes the names are easy and sometimes they're not. But if we're looking at just a long bone, the diaphysis is is the shaft part, so that's the actual middle part. Periosteum is the outside cover. The periosteum is kind of a leathery, tissuey part that protects the bone and also allows for muscle attachment. And this is going to cover the outside of the diaphysis. The epiphysis is the ends that are going to articulate with other bones. And then the articular cartilage, do you think back to when we learned about tissues? Hyaline cartilage is the type of cartilage that covers the ends of the bones at a joint so that they don't rub against each other. So articular cartilage is going to articulate with another bone so the two bones aren't rubbing against each other.
I never get it.
I need to do some physics.
Hey, Olivia, so I get like half.
Oh, if that doesn't have lead in it, let me know.
You're good.
It's like the day
Oh yeah, we'll just sit right now. Like no.
So if we look at this picture of a long bone, this is in Google Classroom, and you will need to know pretty much all of those. Articular cartilage is the cartilage that's covering the end. Remember our terms distal and proximal. So proximal is closer to the origin of the body and distal is further away. So this is the elbow. This is actually, what bone is this?
Humerus.
Humerus. This is the elbow. That's the socket that goes into the shoulder socket. And so this is the distal epiphysis, proximal epiphysis. Epiphyseal line, we will talk about that. The epiphyseal line is actually quite important. It's considered a growth plate, and that's how our long bones grow. We've got our periosteum, which is kind of the tissuey outer covering that's attached very firmly to the bone itself. Medullary cavity, the compact bone, and then the spongy bone. And I think that's all for that picture. Looking at it close up, do you have a question?
It's kind of like not super related, but have you seen like the videos where like anatomy students have to like do different movements, like make videos for their class? Do we have to do anything like that?
No.
You're predicting the future.
Ah,
Yes, there will be different positions that we have to do because there are different ways to move the body, and I think that's more with the muscles though. I can't remember if it's bone or muscles. It might be muscles that we do it with. So
Do we have to make a video like that for like the, what is it, the region of the body?
we did one for the regions of the bodies with stickers,
Yeah.
but this one will be like supinate, pronate, abduct, and adduct, and I think that one is with the muscles.
Yeah, like we did one like that for like another class.
Well, you're gonna do it again.
We had to make
It's good practice.
for it.
All right, close up of what the bone looks like. Here's the periosteum. You can see it's very, very well attached to the outside. It's very hard to like pull it off. Nutrients, now the bones are alive. That's one thing that a lot of people don't realize is they are living tissue. And if you think back to when we learned about tissues, you'll remember that bones actually repair very, very well. Okay, my son broke his finger about 2 months ago now. He was in a brace for a while and now he just has them like buddy taped together. So it's almost healed. Compact bone is made of these circles. We'll talk about that and get into that. The marrow is where the blood cells are formed, but if there's yellow marrow, a lot of that is fat. That's why it's yellow. Endosteum, we'll talk about that a little bit later on too, but the endosteum is the central portion of the canal. It like lines the inside of that central canal. All right, so an epiphyseal plate, also called a growth plate. Epiphyseal plate is how your long bones grow. You can have an x-ray, and if the x-ray shows that your epiphyseal plate is cartilage, then that means you're going to continue to grow. If your epiphyseal plate has ossified and turned into bone, that means you have stopped growing. So at your guys' age, your epiphyseal plates are probably starting to turn into bone, and so you're probably starting to reach your adult height. My children, however, are still growing, and so all of their epiphyseal plates are still cartilage, and as long as it's cartilage, they will continue to grow.
How do you know if it's bone?
X-ray. In an X-ray, it will show clear if it is cartilage or black. It'll show white if it is bone. And we'll actually look at some pictures of that later on. The epiphyseal line is the remnant of the epiphyseal plate. So in adults, once you've reached your adult height, I have been 5'9" for a very long time. I'm not gonna change. So all of mine are obviously going to show the remnant of it. You can still see it, but it's turned into bone.
I'm so sorry. Just a ceremony. Say if I say I wish I was like at least. And since it's gonna be days, it's just short. Hopefully. What do you mean? What do you mean? That's what I'm saying.
All right, so again, you'll need to know all the parts on this picture. There will be a labeling section on your test. It's gonna be a big test. We're gonna spend quite a bit of time in this unit, so it's gonna be a big test. At least 50 points. As I said, I'm gonna have to go back and redo the test a little bit since I'm gonna have to set it up a little differently. But about half of it will be questions and labeling like this, and the other half will be actual bone identification. Endosteum lines the inner surface of the shaft. So inside the shaft, there's a hollow part that lining on the inside is the endosteum. The medullary cavity is the cavity inside the shaft, and this is where the blood is going to form in this medullary cavity. Yellow marrow is mostly in adults, and it's mostly fat. And then we have red marrow in younger children until the age of 6 or 7. So I have kids 11, 8, 5, and 3. So 2 of my kids still have red marrow, the rest probably have yellow marrow. And it's just because those 2 are still so young, their body is still producing a lot of red blood cells and still growing very quickly. And so they're gonna have that red marrow in order to produce more blood more quickly.
I'm so excited to have a TA. I have A+ in here. I thought I had a TA or instead of last 6 months ago. This one, those shows that with me. I heard that. No, I will because this freshman is
They're not
so
saying
bad. For what? Teacher,
All right, that is a lot for the first hour on the first day back to school.
That's all.
Yeah, with that back
I'm also going to start putting the key points in the student notes section, so you guys can have these key points there as well. I am going to start putting more things in
Guys, I made a New Year's resolution. I was gonna.
Oh!
Sorry.
The second crash course is you watching a video and you making your own crash course. Okay? So the first one is normal, that you watch it, you fill in the blanks. The second one, you watch it and you make a crash course. Okay? So those are your two assignments. They're both due Friday by 4.
I'm gonna go to get all A's this semester. No, like I'm one semester of high school.
Your slideshow. It's the second semester.
All of these I saw like all these.
Our what?
Do we need to keep anything?
Only if you want, but I mean, we won't really.